Hello all, welcome to my video. So as promised, in this one we're gonna be having a look at something called XDebug. Now what XDebug is, it's a debugging module for PHP which allows you to do debugging. So it allows you to do things like set breakpoints in your application, and then when PHP runs that piece of code, it will stop at that and then it will tell something like PHP Storm what is actually going on there, like what are the current variables there. So to get started, the first thing that we would have to do, I've already done this actually, but I'll take you through it. So I'm running PHP 7.1 at the moment. So I know just out of experience that what I need is this PHP 7.1 -xdebug. And then this thing now should tell me that node selected xdebug instead of xdebug is already the newest version. So I've already installed this. Cool. So when you install that in this current installation, and I'm using something called Elementary OS, which is based off of, I think, Ubuntu 16.04. So it should be reasonably similar to you. So under the etc php 7.1 folder, you'll see that there is Apache, CLI, and FPM. So when I do my development locally, I use PHP Serve, which is runs under the CLI one. So if you're using something like nginx and FPM to do your development, it'll be running under FPM, and if you're running Apache, then the configurations you'll be looking for sits under Apache. So to get started with the configuration, or what you would need for XDebug, because there is some changes that we need to make to the default configuration for XDebug, is that we are going in this etc php 7.1 CLI-conf.d folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sudo vim, and then I'm going to look for that XDebug. So we got 20 XDebug in here, which is one of the 20s. So yeah, there we go. There's XDebug. So let's have a look at something like the two lines that I added. So PHP Storm has this tool for XDebugging. I think it's called, for one thing, just to be clear, I'm not running PHP Storm. So I'm running IntelliJ Ultimate Edition, which has a PHP plugin which has the same features as PHP Storm, but this isn't actually PHP Storm. This is IntelliJ IDEA. But let's see. So PHP Storm has a very similar function to this. So under run, you'll see there's a start listening for PHP debug connections. So let's just actually do this. Let's open up a new tab over here. So let's do a netstat and then what we are looking for is we are looking if we are running port, sorry, let's do a grep there. So we are looking to see if we are running port 90. Oh, sorry, 9000. So you see that we are running port 80, which I have no idea why I'm running that. I'll probably still have to stop it, but let's see. So if we do port 9000, we are not running anything. So if we go under run here and we say start listening for debug connections, what we should probably see is that, okay, so now I'm listening port 9000. So what I just did is I opened up a port in IntelliJ IDEA. Well, actually, I think I opened it up in XDebug, but I did that via IntelliJ IDEA, and you've got exactly the same feature out of the box with PHP Storm. So what would happen now if we were to run a piece of PHP code under the CLI is that, and if we have enabled this, okay, so this is why we need the remote enabled, right? So by default, XDebug doesn't have this remote enabled running, so you can only do kind of, I should put this, the debugging via things like HTTP headers or something like that. But what this remote enable does for us, when you start running a PHP script, it opens or tries to connect to port 9000 running on a local machine. And then when it can do that, and when it detects that it does a debug, it says like, okay, cool, I've got a debug. So then, for instance, it will communicate with IntelliJ IDEA or XDebug in the background, and it would ask for things like breakpoints, and it would hit breakpoints. It would report back and say, listen, yeah, I've hit this breakpoint, and here are the current variables within the scope. Okay, so that's what that remote enable does. It tells XDebug to listen, or sorry, to connect to port 9000 when it starts up a script. So it's important to have that because by default it's not enabled. So, okay, so the next one is the remote auto start. So what the remote auto start does, it tells XDebug to always do that, to always go and try to connect to port 9000. Because by default, to enable all of this XDebug, you have to send special headers to the PHP script, HTTP headers to the PHP script to enable XDebug as well for just that script. Now, for instance, if you were running things like command line PHP script, which you would sometimes do within Laravel, it doesn't always work that well. Right? Actually, to be honest, on terms of like getting the CLI working and XDebug working with CLI commands without this remote auto start, I have no idea how to do that. Right? So that's why I do that. For one, is a CLI. The second one, if I'm testing things like PHP APIs via like Android emulator or Android device that's pointing to my development machine, I also put that auto start in there, so when I hit the APIs from that mobile device, is that I can run a debug against them. Because otherwise I would have to script something into the mobile device to be able to debug it, right? So remote enabled tells XDebug to connect to port 9000, and remote auto starts to tell it to always do that for every script that it runs. That's why we have those two there. Okay, so another little gotcha with that port 9000 thing is that, let's see, actually just, I'm not going to edit the file, so I think it should be fine just opening Atom here. Hopefully we'll start soon. Anyway. So while we're waiting for Atom to run, here we go, cool. Let's close up that. Let's close up the welcome screens. So under FPM, as you've got this pool www.conf. So if you were to using a network socket rather than a Unix socket for FPM, is that the network socket by default listens on port 9000 for FPM. So that's another little gotcha. So, but for instance, if we were to be running port 9000 or using port 9000 for FPM, if I remember correctly, then when you try to run this JetBrains command here, down this one, it should complain to you saying that it can't open up or can't listen on port 9000 because it's already used. But that is one gotcha to remember from FPM. It uses the exact same port or network port if you've configured the network port, and you'll find it under www.conf here. Or we can use that netstat command to see if we're already listening on port 9000. But yeah, if you are listening on port 9000 for www.conf, is that you would change it under, for FPM is under this www.conf, under the pool.d file folder, is that we've got this listen directive which tells it how to listen to incoming connections that something like Nginx would send it. And for Apache we don't have that problem because if I remember correctly, the PHP stuff runs within an Apache process already, so Apache doesn't have that FPM port 9000 thing. So that's one other gotcha to remember about port 9000, is just make sure that if you've got FPM installed, that it's not listening on port 9000 already. So I think we're going to get into the debugging now. So first thing that we would do is just, let's stop it here. So the first thing that you would want to do is go under run, go start listening for PHP connections, and then the simple thing then what we'd do is then just put a breakpoint down, right, in the script that you're running. So we know how to put a breakpoint down. Let's just close up all that stuff so I can take you from the beginning. So this is the command that we ran that broke. So when you've got this sort of error, like I find it a lot that people actually don't read errors when they get them. So the first thing to do is to read the error and try to understand what's going on there. So we've got a type error, argument 2 passed of password broker must implement interface, but a null was given. So we know that we're passing through a null where we're expecting a class of type with an interface of user provider, and it was being called in this file. So the first thing that we would want to do is try to find this file over here. So this password broker. So JetBrains has this cool thing. If you double tap shift, it gets this search everywhere pop-up box. So what we would do is we would just type in broker manager, if I can spell right. Okay, so it's the framework SOC Illuminate auth password. Okay, so we've got the right one. So we know then, and it's got there on ports on line 75. So 75 is this one. So, but because that is with another method parameters, we probably just put our breakpoint there on the return, and then what we would do is just try to run this command again. So we see that, okay, so we know it's on the second parameter from that error message that we read that we're having this problem. So the problem with this one is this create user provider is giving us a nullback. So the first thing that we would probably want to do is try to find out where this create user provider is, because it's a bit sort of obtuse because we have this app auth. So let's copy that. Now JetBrains also has this cool thing where it's got this evaluate arbitrary expression. So if we click that, we get this sort of dialog box, and it's already populated that for us. If we click evaluate, then we suddenly see, okay, well, we've got the result of Illuminate auth manager. So it's telling us exactly what this app auth thing is. So we need to then go to that auth manager. So if we go to auth manager, okay, so we got auth manager open, and let's quickly have a look at the structure. So what we are looking for, if I remember correctly, is this create user provider. So let's have a look at create user provider. So we can type in here just create user provider to see what, okay. So we only got two creates here, but it's not the one that we're looking for. So let's just have a quick look at this class. Okay. So does it do any sort of, okay, cool. So we can see that it uses a trait here, right? So let's actually have a look at the trait, because this one, this trait is called create user provider. So this kind of looks exactly like we were looking for. Oh, and look, there we go. That's the create user provider. So let's actually just dump another breakpoint over here. Okay, so we know this thing is somehow returning null, and we can already see over here that the provider that we got is null. So let's have a look here. So what are we? Okay, so there we go. So that return, because it doesn't have anything else after the return, is we know that that is actually null that we're getting back from this. So we're getting a null back, but one of the problems that we can already see is that the provider is null. So if we pass in a null provider, I think it's reasonable to assume that this get provider configuration is going to give us a null back. So let's see, provider, let's get default provider user. Okay. So let's see what this provider is, or what this. Let's do that. Okay. So we can see now by the debugging down there is that we're not debugging anymore. So we have to run the command again. So if we click that, and then okay. So again, we've got this sort of obtuse, whatever that is. So what's this looking for? So we got config, and then the items we got auth, dot providers, users. Okay, so we've got auth providers under users, and the provider that we have there is users. And the driver is doctor. Okay, interesting. So let's okay, we got this step out function to see, okay, so it actually passed this one. Weird. Anyway, okay, so let's just run that again. Okay, so actually now this is getting called. So now the first thing that we know is that this create user provider and this auth manager thing is getting called twice, because we would expect that this breakpoint hits before the other two first hit. So let's just keep running this. Let's see what we get now. So now we get the provider null over there. And if we run it again, let's see, okay, now we get a provider null. So then if we have a look at the state of the auth, it's still the same. So it's auth, providers, and then the only one we have here is users, right? Which is very weird. Okay. So let's just kind of try and escape here, because now we kind of get why we're getting null here. So, okay, so now we've got a error then. Okay, so let's run it again. So let's see. Okay, so we know that, okay, so we know this one's fine, and because for some reason it's being run twice. The first run it's successful, but this one it's not. Okay, so let's see. Config driver table passwords expiring null. So the driver here is doctrine, password reset name. Okay, so let's have a look at this config that we actually passing through, because we know that's null. But we, okay, so under the config here, we've got driver table expiry. But what we're actually looking for, if we look at the second argument, we are looking for provider. Now, if I remember correctly, when I set up all this doctrine stuff under the auth, that for resetting password, this is I see a driver table expiry, but it's looking for provider. So yeah, I kind of made a foobar here, because I can see that obviously that the config that I provided here is invalid. It's a bug, it's a problem. The config that I provided, it's wrong. So let's see, let's change that to provider. So let's see what providers we have, right? So if we were to run this again, so that's the first one we pass is fine. Okay, so the first time it ran with the provider of users. The second time it ran with the provider of doctrine. So let's just see what it does now. So we've got this app auth config. So this app, okay, let's just run a little thing again. Let's do this app auth, sorry, config, I think this time. See that? Okay, so we got 7 results. So let's go under then providers provide. Okay, but we only have the user provider that we defined for doctrine. So the first thing I can see is that the doctrine that we provide is completely wrong, because what we actually need to provide there is users, right? So if we were to do this, it would probably still give us back a null pointer saying that, okay, which it did. So let's look under auth. So let's do users then. So I think the same way that provider users refers there goes to there. So now this provider users is the same as up there, over there, sorry, and over there, which references this provider's over here. So now let's see if what happens if we run it again. Okay, so we got users, we got another users, and then we hit this, then we got users, then we got providers, let's use. Okay, so our expectation now is, oh, okay, cool. Our expectation was now, because we fixed those problems, that it would work, which it absolutely did. And I think you guys can understand why we wanted to try and do this thing, because we know exactly, we can inspect the variables without having to do things like var dumps, print r's, and dies. And we can also, sometimes when we ran the debugger, we could debug and look at the variables interactively instead of trying to guess which ones we should have var dump each time. And we also that way discovered that I am actually quite a bit of an idiot sometimes. Let's have a look. Okay, so we can clear out those things. So let's also have a look quickly, if we can, at why it ran twice. So those auth provider things is probably spec by the app one. Okay. So let's see. We've got a reset provider doctrine. Okay. Okay, so I did actually uncomment this. Okay, so I can't think of any reasonable reason why that thing would run twice. Other than there was some default Laravel thing that's still stuck around, but I'm not going to bore you about think how to do that. Actually, I think I am, because I think there is something interesting about that. So let's do, I think Control E was it. So this Control E brings up sort of recently changed files, and let's put a debugger back there. So let's have a look at this. So I think this was the first time it ran. So we can actually have a look here at the stack. Over here we can have a look at the stack, so we can see exactly where and how this was called. Okay, so this whole thing gets called when we do the session driver stuff. So this stuff is actually in the session, right? So if we go to the session thing, let's have a look here. Encrypt, file, storage, frames, sessions, connection, null, table session, store, null, lottery, cookie session, null session, path, domain, secure, HTTP only, same site. Okay, interesting. And let's have a look. Create session driver. Create a session-based authentication guard. Okay, so I think this is actually also still in all stuff. So, do you know why this is? This is the guards. These are the guards that's being run. So this is this driver session and provider users. That's why it's getting called twice, is because of these guards that gets defined. And yeah, okay. So I think I'll leave you guys with that and to go play around. If you've got any questions about this XDebug thing, or you found like another bug or problem that it caused, please just drop a comment in the comment section on YouTube, and I'll see if I can get back to you. And I think next time I'll be show you a PHP unit test for the doctrine stuff. And until then, I hope you're well, and I hope to see you again next time. Cheers, guys. Bye bye.